Okay. I think we may be okay now. Okay, I think we're okay. I think we're good. Yes.
All right.
Turn on.
Welcome to this hybrid MetroPlan Orlando TSMO meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I apologize this morning. We had some technical difficulties, so we are running about 25 minutes behind. My name is Kelly Brock, and I'll be chairing the meeting today for Doug Jamison, Chair, and Alex Laffey, Vice Chair. We have several committee members physically present to make our quorum, and the rest are joining us virtually. I'll ask all committee members attending in person to please speak clearly so those joining us virtually can hear. We're all wearing masks, and we'll need to make an extra effort to ensure good audio quality. Committee members joining us online will participate in the discussion and vote on action items. We'll ask you to mute your microphone when you're not speaking and use the raise hands feature on your Zoom toolbar. The public will be able to participate virtually as well. There are 2 public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public who want to speak will use the raise hands feature on the Zoom screen. If attending by phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand and request to be recognized. When you're called, your microphone will be temporarily unmuted by staff and will ask you to state your name and contact information for the record. We also accepted comments by email before the meeting. Those of you in the boardroom this morning will notice a change. Each of you has a monitor in front of you, and you also have a brief instruction sheet on how to use it. And Mr. Hill went over that earlier this morning, but I didn't. Eric, did you want to speak to that new equipment briefly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome again, everyone here live and everyone that is beaming in. We did fill some of the time with the delay in instructions on how to use the tandem device. One particular item that I did leave out is the camera is on the left side of the monitor, and so unless you want people to see something like a water bottle instead of you, just make sure the water bottle is not there. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll move into agenda review.
Okay.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Kelly, for serving as the chair of this meeting without Doug or Alex being with us. We appreciate your patience and understanding, especially this morning with our technical difficulties as we try to conduct our committee meetings safely. As you know, we've had intended to return to full in-person meetings at our office today, but current health conditions made that difficult. So we now plan to continue to do these hybrid-type meetings for the rest of the year. When we use this format, we need to have a quorum of 15 members in the room, just as we do at an in-person meeting, which we discussed earlier. The crucial difference is that with a minimum quorum in the room, we can conduct votes in which all members participate, and those members online are counted as present. This makes it very important to RSVP for meetings, so we know if we are in danger of not having a quorum and can prepare for that, possibly by contacting members one-on-one to make sure we can get the right number of people here. There will still be a Zoom option available for the public, and we encourage members of the public to remain virtual as we observe the meeting and make public comments. When we meet in person, we are observing current CDC guidelines and ask all members to wear masks during the meeting. We ask that everyone be considerate of each other, and please let me know if you have concerns. So, Mr. Chairman, that is some of my lead-in to, or some of my coverage of the review of the agenda, so let me move into a couple of the items here. I want to make everyone aware of a presentation about Brightline coming up on the MetroPlan Orlando board agenda on September the 8th. We had hoped to have representatives from Brightline at our committee meetings, but their schedule is very tight, so we hope you can either attend the board meeting on Zoom that day or view the video to hear the to hear the latest from Brightline. I'll send a reminder to you. One pressing issue between now and the end of the year is election of TSMO officers. Our bylaws state that we need to hold that election at the last meeting of the year, which is December the 3rd. Our current chairman has done a great job, Doug Jameson, of leading us over the past 2 years, but 2 years is the limit, according to the bylaws, so we need a new chair. At this time, it is uncertain if our vice chair, Alex Lassie, will be available to serve and move into that position, if elected by the membership. At our next meeting on October 22nd, we will choose a subcommittee, as we have in the past, with members from each county. The subcommittee can meet virtually in November to come up with recommendations for chair and vice chair. At the December meeting, this subcommittee will make the recommendations and the members will vote. Also, I want to bring your attention to the Tracking the Trends flyer in your agenda package. We've been doing this Tracking the Trends for over 20 years, and it started with Keith Caffey doing an outstanding job, and it's evolved. So Tracking the Trends is a long-standing project for MetroPlan Orlando, and I encourage you to spend a little time looking at the report on our website. It has a lot of interesting information. A couple other items, and I will be done, Mr. Chair. I did mention that we wanted to schedule a workshop on drones with the Traffic Incident Management Committee that the department manages to look at applications for transportation operations and management. Drones are permitted to be used by law enforcement, and so we want to see if there's some way that we can, work in the gray area with using drones for traffic management reasons. So we are planning to do this workshop. We want to do it as a classroom/demonstration where we start out at the TMC with hearings and presentations and then move outside where we can have a demonstration. The wonderful thing about technology, and I'm infatuated with technology but not in love with it, as we experienced this morning, is that we will be able to stream this. So if you do not want to join in person and just attend virtually, we should be able to accommodate you for that. We want to send out a survey to everyone just to get some information from each of you on your use of drones in your jurisdictions. A couple new folks that we have with us, Steve Kane from Osceola County and Kevin Feldbinger from St. Cloud, from the city of St. Cloud. And one casting change on the agenda this morning is Chris Bain from Fiddlesons and Associates will be giving the presentation this morning instead of Law About from MetroPlan Orlando. That is all that I have, and I'd like to turn it over to Lisa to do a roll call.
Okay. Can everybody hear me now? I hope. So I will ask all committee members online to please unmute yourselves for the roll call, while those in the room keep your microphones off until called. Online participants, please make sure your video is on if possible so that we can confirm that it's you. You will find the unmute and video buttons on the bottom left side of your Zoom screen. Please say here or present after your name is called. And I will start with the committee members that are present here in the boardroom. Blackadar.
Here.
Broad.
Here.
Brock.
Here.
El Hassar.
Here.
Gordon.
Here.
Dredge.
Here.
Krug.
Here.
Margrath.
Here.
Muhison.
Here.
Nastasi.
Here.
Pulliam.
Here.
Richmond.
Here.
Sonoran.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Tracy.
Here.
Walter.
Here.
Okay, and now we'll call those for joining us online. Bayard.
Here.
Cash.
Here.
Clem.
Present.
Felblinger,
Here.
Frill, Gold, Gianella,
Present.
Herschelman, Homiani,
Present.
Kane,
Present.
Kelly, Lee,
Here.
Matthias, McDaniel, Wyatt, Wetzel.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum present here in the boardroom.
Thank you, Lisa. We will now hear public comments on action items. Do we have people who want to speak to any of these items? If so, please use the raise hands function found at the bottom of your screen or by pressing *9 on your phone keypad. When we call your name, the host will unmute your microphone. You will see a button pop up that says the host wants to unmute you. Accept that prompt to activate your microphone. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record. Please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. Are there any comments at this time?
Mr. Chairman, there are no comments on the virtual side.
Thank you. And are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting? None. Okay. Moving on to action items, we have 4 action items today. To keep things running smoothly, I will ask for comments first from our virtual attendees, then from members in the room. Members making or seconding a motion, please state your name so we have that for the record. The first item is approval of the TSMO virtual workshop minutes from October 2020 to June 2021 at tab 1 in your agenda packets. We did previously discuss all these minutes except the latest ones. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? And do I have a second?
Second.
Right.
Who's the motion maker and seconder, please?
I didn't catch that.
Luheisen, they asked.
Oh, yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, who
Yep,
took action, then who seconded it?
yep, Blackadar seconded it.
So Luheisen first, and then Blackadar second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I'll first ask our online participants. No one
There
online?
are no hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anyone in the room? All right. This is a voice vote. All members online, please unmute your microphones. Those in the room, please just speak out. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great. Hearing none, the motion passes. Our next item is the ratification of board action items that occurred from December 2020 to July 2021, found at tab 2 in your agendas. We did discuss all of these items, and the board has already taken action. So this is acknowledgement of that action. We are not voting on the individual items. Do I have a motion to ratify these action items?
Motion to approve, Ms. Claus.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Great. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I'll first ask our online participants.
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
Okay, great. And now anybody in the room? Okay, this is a voice vote. All members online, please unmute your microphones. Those in the room, please just speak out. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Our next item is an FDOT amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program concerning funds that have rolled forward from the past fiscal year. This is found at tab 3 in your agendas. Mr. Keith Caskey from MetroPlan Orlando will present the information. Please hold your questions on this item until the presentation is finished. And go ahead, Keith.
Okay, good morning. This amendment includes projects that had funds that were originally programmed in fiscal year 2021 in last year's TIP, and those funds were not committed by the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. So they just automatically roll forward to fiscal year 22 in FDOT's new adopted 5-year work program. So we have to amend our TIP to include these projects so it'll be consistent with the work program. And this is a routine procedure that we go through about this time every year. And you all have the roll forward report from FDOT and some other information in tab 3 in your packets. So with that, unless there's any questions, we're asking for your approval of the amendment.
Keith, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can we pause for a second because the audio on this side is not good at all. We're not hearing what you're saying. So can we just pause for just a moment to see if we can get this straightened out?
Okay.
I'm laughing, Keith, if you can't see it. Okay, go ahead, Keith.
Okay, I'll start over. This amendment includes projects that had funds that were originally programmed in fiscal year 2021 in last year's TIP, and those funds were not committed by the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. So they just automatically roll forward into fiscal year 2022 in FDOT's new adopted 5-year work program. So we have to amend our TIP to include these projects so it'll be consistent with the work program. This is a routine procedure that we go through about this time every year. And you all have the roll forward report and from FDOT and some other information in tab 3 in your packets. So unless there's any questions, we're asking for your approval of the amendment.
Okay, if there are no questions, do I have a motion to approve this amendment?
Motion to approve the amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Heisen. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I'll first ask our online participants.
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
And now those in the room. Thank you. This is a voice vote. All committee members online, please unmute your microphone. Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Our next and final action item, is another amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program that details which Sunrail projects that had funds rolling forward from the past fiscal year. It is found at tab 4 in your agendas, and Keith Caskey will also present this information. Please hold your questions until he is finished. Go ahead, Keith.
Okay, well, this amendment's similar to the first one. This is Sunrail's version of their roll forward report. These are Sunrail projects that had funds that roll forward from fiscal year 21 to 22. So again, we have to include these projects in the TIP so it'll be consistent with the work program. And as the chairman said, you all have the information on this in tab 4. So we're asking for your approval of this amendment as well.
I noticed something on one of the sheets, the board fact sheet. It says from fiscal year 2019-20 to fiscal year 2020 to 2021. I think it's supposed to be 2021 to 21-22.
Okay, Keith, did you hear that question?
It's on the board fact sheet.
On the board fact sheet?
On the fact sheet? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'll make that correction.
Toward the back of the whole tab. And it's the same in the TAC package.
Okay.
So, are there any other questions?
There are none on the virtual side, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So do I have a motion to approve this amendment? We may want to make acknowledgement of Mr. Shadsmith's correction.
Yeah, I moved with the correction to the board fact sheet to approve this item.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do I have a second? Second. Thanks. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I'll first ask our online participants.
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
Thank you. And anybody in the room? All right, this is a voice vote. All committee members online, please unmute your microphones. Those in the room, please just speak out. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to presentations. We have one presentation today. Participants online, please use the raise hands function to be recognized if you want to ask a question. You may raise your hand during the presentation, but we will hold questions until the presentation ends. Participants in the room, please put your nameplate on end to signal that you wish to ask a question, and we will recognize you at the end. The presentation is on MetroPlan Orlando traffic signal retiming using connected vehicle data, and we will have Chris Bain from Kittleson present this. Mr. Bain?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me to present this morning. My name is Chris. I work for Kittleson and Associates, and we've had the pleasure of working with Laura and MetroPlan for the past several years to evaluate MetroPlan Orlando's signal retiming program. This last year, we also had the chance to start looking at using connected vehicle data to do this evaluation, and that's what I'll be sharing about today. We could go to the next slide. So the purpose of this presentation is to introduce a new data source that's available both for this project, but also other projects in the region, and also to discuss the development of new performance measures that reflect goals of signal retiming projects. Next slide. Before we get into the connected vehicle data, wanted to just go back and talk a little bit about the signal retiming program. Historically, this program has been mostly focused on corridor travel time, and that's been working out well for us. Usually we've been choosing corridors that we want to reduce the travel time on, but as the program has grown and developed, we've also started to have other focuses of retiming, and some of these new metrics will help us evaluate those new focuses. Next slide. When MetroPlan Orlando started evaluating the retiming program, we would collect data by driving a car up and down the corridor during the peak period. So you would start at one end and then time how long it took you to get to the other end. This was a pretty laborious task and only allowed us to collect about 4 to 8 data points for each of our corridors. Then in 2011, when Bluetooth data became more readily available, MetroPlan Orlando switched the program to instead start using those Bluetooth devices to record travel time. We've been using that same method for about 7 years now. Then last year, when COVID-19 started and there was changes in work from home and other travel patterns, we had some problems with being able to collect our data consistently before and after retiming projects. So that led us to start looking at other available data sources that might have had data collected before changes in travel patterns occurred. And so that's how we ended up coming across connected vehicle data, and then led to all of this other work and analysis. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I'll get into the data itself. Next slide. So the connected vehicle data we've been using was purchased from a company called Wejo. Wejo gets this data from General Motors vehicles with model years 2015 and more recent. And this data is reporting the location, speed, and direction that these vehicles are going about every 3 seconds. The data set represents approximately 3% of the total vehicles in the MetroPlan Orlando region. If you're familiar with that idea of floating car runs that I talked about, where you would drive a car up and down the corridor, the level of detail in the data is similar to that, where you're able to see where the vehicle is pretty precisely. Next slide, please. So on the bottom of this slide is shown an image of a few of the journeys that we can extract from the data. Each color of the dots corresponds to a different trip. So if you look at the orange dots, for example, you can see that the trip enters on the right side of the slide, approaches the intersection before it gets stopped at the intersection. You can see right next to the stop bar, there's a couple of orange dots close together before continuing on through the intersection. And so kind of as this diagram shows, there's a pretty high granularity in the data where you can really see what vehicles are doing as they travel through the corridor. And that has allowed us to collect some additional metrics, which I'll talk about in a moment. We think that this data will also be useful for other projects beyond the signal retiming evaluation. And we think that this data will help MetroPlan Orlando prepare for future data availability, such as will be when connected vehicles are more common. Next slide, please. One thing that is important to MetroPlan Orlando is making sure that this data is representative of the region and takes into account equity considerations. So we took a look at where these vehicles were starting most of their trips compared to the environmental justice focus areas, and found that the connected vehicle data underrepresents environmental justice focus areas compared to the rest of the region. So we want to be mindful of that when we're doing our analysis, that that bias will not disproportionately affect people living in environmental justice focus areas. Next slide, please. One of the first things we did for this project was compare the connected vehicle data to Bluetooth data. So our question was, can we measure the same things that we were trying to measure before with Bluetooth? In this figure, we can see the Bluetooth travel times in the blue bars, and the red bars show the WeJo travel times. The gray diamonds are showing the average travel time over the course of a week. So one thing that you might notice is that the WeJo data has 3 diamonds or 2 or 3 diamonds instead of just 1 for Bluetooth data. That's because with the WeJo data, we can collect data for a longer period of time than with the Bluetooth data, where we usually just collect 1 week of data. In general, the patterns between the WeJo data and the Bluetooth data are similar, although the travel times themselves are a little bit different, which we think is due to just differences in methodology. Next slide, please. At a high level, though, we found that the Bluetooth and connected vehicle travel times are typically within 30 seconds of each other. And we also found that if the Bluetooth data showed a reduction in travel time for a corridor, then the WeJo data also typically shows a reduction in travel time for the corridor, which is the focus of this evaluation. Next slide. So I will now talk about a few additional performance measures that we're able to calculate using this data. So previously, we've focused on this top row of metrics, which is end-to-end travel time, segment travel time, and delay at intersections. And we're still able to calculate all of those metrics with the WeJo data, but because of the increased granularity, we can also look at some other metrics, including signal progression and the number of stops and slowdowns, and the traveled speed along the corridor. Each of these metrics has a limitation, but when we view them all together, we can start to get a pretty complete picture of what the benefits of the signal retiming program are. And each of these metrics might be applicable to different projects, depending on what the goal of the retiming is. Next slide, please. So the first metric that we can look at is the number of stops and slowdowns along the corridor. This image here is showing just one individual trip coming from the data, and you can see on the y-axis how fast the vehicle is going, and the x-axis will show what time in the journey we're at. So in this example, the vehicle starts out going about 45 miles per hour, speeds up a little bit, and then you can see a dip where they slow down to about 15 miles per hour. Anytime that the vehicle drops below 20 miles per hour, we would count that as a slowdown. In this example, then the vehicle speeds up again before coming back down all the way to 0 miles per hour. And anytime the vehicle drops below 5 miles per hour, we'd count that as a stop. And so we're able to do this kind of analysis for every journey along the corridor to count up how many times the vehicle will stop and slow down. Once we do that for each vehicle, then we can calculate average statistics like the number of times that you're likely to stop or slow down along the corridor, both before and after the retiming. Next slide, please. This data is really helpful for before and after comparisons and helps get at the idea of how often you're getting a green light at a big picture level. Next slide, please. And there's a little video, if you could click in the bottom left of the slide. Another thing we can see with the data is where queuing is occurring. So this data is showing vehicles that are going less than 5 miles per hour. And now you can see the queue back up a little bit, all the way back to Livingston Street. And so this data is helpful to see approximately what the queue is doing. I do say approximately because of the small sample size, only about 3% of the trips will tend to underestimate the queue length. But it is helpful from a qualitative perspective, just not as easy to compare before and after. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Building off of that idea of stops and slowdowns, one of the other things we can look at is how the stops and slowdowns occur at specific signals. So in this picture on the bottom left, you can see the dots of a vehicle approaching, and the vehicle approaches starting at 50 miles per hour, but then ends up slowing down and ends up stopping at this intersection. And so we're able to record for each vehicle if they stop or slow down at each intersection. And the other images here show other examples of the one in the middle showing vehicle that approaches the intersection, slows down to 6 miles per hour, but then speeds up again. And the image on the right showing a vehicle that continues through. And so we're able to do that again for each journey. And then if you go to the next slide, please. We can then aggregate all of that information for the corridor to get an idea of what percentage of vehicles stop or continue through a signal. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Similar to that metric, we can also get into an even finer level of detail where we look at each vehicle progressing through the corridor, and we can create what's called a time-space diagram. The time-space diagram on the x-axis has time, and on the y-axis has the intersections that the vehicle's proceeding through. So you can see on this example that there's a lot of red and horizontal movement at State Road 438 in about the middle of the graphic. And so that's showing that vehicles are getting stopped there, and then they're getting spread out in their travel time. This kind of information could be helpful to given existing conditions to the retiming team. Next slide, please. And then another way that we can look at the data is the portion of time people are going at different speeds. So this orange line shows the average portion of time that vehicles spend going a given speed. So for example, vehicles typically on this corridor were spending about 13% of their time going between 45 and 50 miles per hour. If we have a goal on the signal retiming project of speed management and helping people go the posted speed, then we would hope to see this number move over to the left, or the line move over to the left, so that more people are traveling at or below the posted speed. Next slide, please. And next slide again. And then the last metric that I'll mention is corridor utilization. So we're able to observe the distance that trips are going along the corridor. So we can look for patterns such as shown here between the orange circles as vehicles going down the whole corridor, or as the green and blue circles show vehicles going down a portion of the corridor. This information is helpful in order to understand how signals should be coordinated together and if there's a common type of trip that people are making down the corridor. Next slide, please. And next slide again. And so with that, I'll take any questions, or if you have questions afterwards, please reach out to Laura, Eric, or myself, and we'll make sure to get those answered for you.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. First, I'll recognize those participating virtually if you have any questions.
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
All right, thank you. Now, anybody in the room, questions? Awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, I saw this presentation before, and as you know, my concern is the low penetration rates for the data source. And my question is, have you considered other vendors for the same type of data? I know Weijia is not the only one.
Yep. We have not considered it as part of MetroPlan Orlando project. For other projects, we've been looking at other vendors as well. So the balance is typically between granularity of data and sample size. So Weijia provides a really high granularity of data where we can see really specifically what a vehicle is doing, but a lower sample size. Other vendors like cell phone data companies can provide a greater sample size, but a lower granularity. So just have to choose between those right now.
I think it would be helpful to do a comparison between data from Weijia and other vendors as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions in the room?
Chris, have you looked at, during the corridors that you've looked at, have you looked at the implementation of smart signals, or were smart signals part of this study at all in your corridor?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think usually the corridors that are being retimed have time of day plans, not adaptive, but can also follow up about that.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else?
Chris, hi, this is Cade with the Silver Orlando. Just a quick question. In terms of like the labor involved with processing the type of graphs and data summaries that showed, how does this compare to the Bluetooth data? So for example, is this more labor intensive to reduce the CV data compared to the Bluetooth data?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. It is more labor intensive to sift through all of the points, and also more computer intensive. The Bluetooth data is, if for that specific measure of travel time, is pretty much plug and play. They can give you just a list of the observed travel times straight from the system, compared to the Weijia data, which gives you individual data points that then you have to do all of the calculations.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Bain. That concludes today's presentation. The next item in your agenda, you will see we have two common presentations with the TAC meeting. You will need to disconnect and sign into the TAC meeting for these presentations. If you are also a member of the TAC, you can go in through the link in the panelist invitation by email. If you're not, then please join the meeting through the public link at metroplanorlando.org/virtual meetings. The meetings at the TAC, the common presentations, will be a presentation on public opinion survey results and a presentation on Florida's Turnpike widening PD&E study. Item 9, there are several items under general information at tab 6 in your agenda packets. Item 10, our next TSMO meeting will be October 22nd, 2021. We don't meet in September. Our October meeting will also be a hybrid meeting. Please remember that RSVPs are very important because we need to take action at that meeting. The final TSMO meeting dates for the remainder of 2021 are included in your agendas. The next MetroPlan Orlando board meeting will be September 8th and will also be a hybrid meeting. At this time, do any committee members want to make final comments? I'll recognize those participating online first. Please use your raise hand function and unmute yourself when you are recognized.
There are no raised hands on the virtual side.
Thank you. For
Mr.
those
Chairman,
in the room, any questions? or
Mr.
comments?
Chairman, this is Virginia. There are no hands on the virtual side, but there is a comment that we would like to acknowledge. The comment is, a connected vehicle does not have to be autonomous, right? So someone may want to respond to that.
Yes, Virginia, that is correct.
Thank you. And there is one panelist that has a hand raised now.
Okay. Go ahead.
Virginia.
Hey, good morning. I couldn't get myself off of unmute. I just wanted to take the opportunity to remind our local partners that our work program staff has started to schedule appointments to make discussions about projects to be added to the tentative work program for the upcoming year. For the MetroPlan region, you should have already heard from staff to begin scheduling those appointments on September the 2nd, next week, Thursday. And if you have not, if your staff has not heard from work program, please feel free to contact me so that we can make sure that those connections have been made. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, I don't have, was that Virginia?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Virginia with Hinton, with DOT. Okay, any comments in the room? Questions? All right. I did want to take the opportunity to let you know this will, if all goes as planned, this will be my last TSMO meeting as the primary representative for the city of Castleberry. I will be moving to be the alternate. I will still be the primary on the TAC, but the city over the past year, because we recognize the importance of the built environment and its impact on community health, we actually created a healthy community manager position. That's an unusual name, but among the many duties of it is trying to improve our mobility, access, active transportation, and equity in the city. So that staff member, Dean Sappelbab, will become the primary for the next TSMO meeting. So it's been many years that I've been the primary on TSMO, so I appreciate my time here, and I'm not going away, but I won't be the regular for TSMO anymore. Item 12 is public comments. If any members of the public wish to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll send you a prompt to unmute your mic. After you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
There are no raised hands at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public attending in person that wish to make a comment?
I have not received any.
All right. And are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting? No. All right. Thank you so much. So at this time, if there is no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
If we're staying for TAC on the same place? Yeah, you don't move it around.
That's when you need me.